Emily Harper's smile was the last thing anyone remembered before she vanished into the Ohio night, leaving behind a town that would never sleep peacefully again. It began like any other Thursday in the quiet town of Maplewood, Ohio. The sun had dipped low behind the trees, casting long shadows over the streets lined with tidy homes and trimmed lawns. 16-year-old Emily Harper waved goodbye to her mother around 5:30 p.m., her backpack slung casually over one shoulder. She said she was heading to her best friend's house just a few blocks away to study for an upcoming exam. It was a routine walk, one she had taken countless times before. No one imagined it would be the last time anyone saw her alive. When Emily didn't return home by dinner, her mother wasn't immediately alarmed. Teenagers lost track of time. Maybe she stayed late talking. Maybe her phone had died. But by 9 p.m., calls to her phone went unanswered. Texts remained unread. Her friend confirmed that Emily had never arrived at her house. Panic began to settle in. Her parents drove through the streets, headlights cutting through the darkness, calling her name out the car window. The same streets that had always felt safe suddenly seemed endless and unfamiliar. By midnight, the police were notified. Officers took a description: 5'4", brown hair, green eyes, wearing a light blue hoodie and jeans. They began canvassing the neighborhood, knocking on doors, asking if anyone had seen a teenage girl walking alone that evening. A few neighbors mentioned seeing Emily earlier near the park entrance, but after that, her trail went cold. No one had noticed anything unusual: no screams, no cars speeding away. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. The following morning, Maplewood woke to the news of Emily's disappearance. Flyers with her photo began appearing on lampposts, store windows, and mailboxes. Local volunteers gathered to search nearby woods, fields, and abandoned lots. The community worked tirelessly, fueled by hope and fear in equal measure. Even those who didn't know the Harper family felt a sense of shared heartbreak. Missing posters fluttered in the autumn wind, each one a painful reminder of how quickly safety could shatter. Police expanded the search, using drones and canine units to comb through every possible area. They checked bus stops, surveillance cameras, and social media accounts. Her phone last pinged near the intersection of Pine and Oak Streets, less than a mile from her home, but there were no further signals after that. It was as if the device had been turned off or destroyed. That detail haunted investigators. News stations picked up the story, calling it the mystery of the missing Ohio girl. Reporters interviewed classmates, teachers, and neighbors, painting a picture of a kind, responsible teenager who had no reason to run away. Emily's mother appeared on camera, pleading for her daughter's safe return, her voice cracking as she clutched a photo taken during last year's school dance. Days passed, each one heavier than the last. Leads came and went, tips turned out to be dead ends. Search parties dwindled as exhaustion set in, though the Harpers never stopped hoping. Candlelight vigils were held outside the local church, the soft glow of hundreds of candles flickering in the cool evening air. People prayed, whispered, cried, and held hands, waiting for a miracle. Yet beneath the town's shared hope, unease began to grow. Maplewood had always felt safe, doors unlocked, children playing outside until dusk, but Emily's disappearance cracked that sense of comfort. Parents started keeping their kids closer, locking doors earlier, glancing twice at passing cars. Everyone asked the same question, but no one had an answer. How could a girl disappear from such a small, quiet town without anyone seeing a thing? The sense of dread hung thick in the air. Even as posters began to fade and search teams grew smaller, one thing was clear: something terrible had happened to Emily Harper, and the truth was hiding somewhere close. Detectives began their investigation the morning after the last organized search. The Harper home, once filled with laughter and the sound of music from Emily's room, had turned into a command center of sorts. Investigators set up laptops, maps, and whiteboards in the living room, trying to piece together the missing puzzle of her final movements. Every call, text, and social media message was scrutinized. Her phone records revealed nothing alarming at first: conversations with classmates about homework, a few light-hearted texts with friends, but one detail caught their attention. A series of messages from an unfamiliar number had begun appearing about 2 weeks before Emily vanished. The messages weren't threatening, but they were odd. Simple things at first: compliments, questions about her day, mentions of seeing her around town. Whoever it was seemed to know her routine, what time she left school, even the coffee shop she sometimes visited. Detectives traced the number, but it was registered to a prepaid phone with no clear owner. The account had been purchased at a local convenience store, and surveillance footage showed only a hooded figure at the counter, face hidden from the camera. Meanwhile, investigators reviewed security camera footage from every street along Emily's usual route. One camera, mounted outside a hardware store, caught her walking past at 5:40 p.m. wearing her blue hoodie and carrying her backpack. She appeared calm, unhurried. Another camera a few blocks away picked her up at 5:48, crossing Pine Street toward the park. After that, there was nothing. The footage simply stopped, as if she'd walked off the edge of the world. Detectives canvassed the area again, questioning residents, shop owners, and anyone who might have been outside that evening. One elderly man mentioned hearing what sounded like a car door slamming near the park around 6 o'clock, but he couldn't recall seeing anything else. Another resident said she noticed a dark sedan parked near an old road leading to the outskirts of town, but at the time it hadn't seemed unusual. As the investigation deepened, rumors began to spread through Maplewood. Some people whispered that Emily had run away, others claimed she'd been taken by someone passing through town. Theories multiplied online, and social media filled with speculation, each post adding more confusion. Detectives stayed focused, ignoring the noise, following the facts. They searched the nearby woods again, finding only fragments: an empty water bottle, a torn piece of fabric, footprints that led nowhere. One clue eventually redirected their attention. A teenage boy from a neighboring school claimed to have seen Emily talking to someone near an abandoned house on the edge of town a few days before she disappeared. The description was vague, just a tall person wearing dark clothes, but the mention of that house struck a nerve with the local police. It was a decaying structure that had stood empty for years, known among kids as a place to explore or dare each other to enter. No one ever stayed long inside. Locals said it gave them a bad feeling, as if time itself had stopped there. Detectives decided to check it out, though many doubted it would lead anywhere. Still, they couldn't ignore the connection. The location was isolated, surrounded by overgrown weeds and broken fences, just far enough from town that no one would hear a thing if something went wrong. They took note of the address and planned a more thorough search in the coming days. By the end of that week, the case had consumed Maplewood entirely. Classrooms sat quieter, the streets felt emptier, and whispers followed every patrol car that passed. What had started as a hopeful search for a missing girl was slowly becoming something darker. Each unanswered question added to a growing sense that whatever had happened to Emily Harper was no accident. The morning the detectives arrived at the abandoned house was cold and gray, the kind of day when the air felt heavy with something unspoken. The house sat at the end of an old gravel road, half swallowed by weeds and vines. Its windows were shattered, its front steps crumbling beneath layers of dirt and fallen leaves. A faded "no trespassing" sign dangled loosely from a rusted chain. For years, kids in Maplewood had dared each other to enter, but few ever did. Most said the place gave them chills, as if it remembered things better left forgotten. Detectives approached cautiously, flashlights in hand, their boots crunching over the gravel. The front door hung crooked, scraping the floor when pushed open. Inside, the smell of mildew and rot hit them immediately. The walls were lined with peeling wallpaper, the floorboards groaned under every step, and the only sound was the faint rustling of wind slipping through broken glass. They split into teams, one searching upstairs, the other taking the lower level. Downstairs, they found signs that someone had been there recently. Empty water bottles, food wrappers, and a thin blanket lay in the corner of what had once been a living room. It wasn't much, but it meant someone had used the space for shelter or hiding. A few cigarette butts lay near the windowsill, and faint footprints marked the dusty floor. One of the detectives took photos, noting that the tracks appeared smaller than an adult's. Upstairs, things were eerier. The walls were covered in graffiti, some of it childish, some strange and unsettling. A broken mirror leaned against the wall, its surface spotted with grime. In what used to be a bedroom, there was a small notebook half buried under a pile of junk. It was damp, most of its pages smudged and torn, but the first few pages still showed handwriting, short sentences, drawings, and dates. When examined closely, it appeared to belong to Emily. The handwriting matched notes her family had provided from her school notebooks. The discovery froze the air in the room. It was the first solid connection they'd found in weeks. One detective followed a narrow staircase leading to the basement. The air grew colder, the smell stronger. His flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing cracked concrete and scattered debris. The basement was cluttered with old furniture and broken tools, a place forgotten by time. But in one corner, behind a toppled shelf and a sheet of torn fabric, something caught the light, a small piece of blue material, the same shade as the hoodie Emily had been wearing. When they cleared away the debris, silence filled the space. The moment stretched endlessly before anyone spoke. There, hidden beneath layers of dust and broken boards, they found Emily Harper. The sight left the room still, each officer frozen in disbelief. The missing girl everyone had searched for was finally found, but not in the way anyone had hoped. The coroner was called immediately, and the area was sealed off. Outside, police tape fluttered in the wind as word spread through Maplewood. Residents gathered at the end of the road, their faces pale with grief and disbelief. The abandoned house, once just a relic of the past, had become the center of a nightmare. As the body was carried out, the detectives exchanged glances heavy with unspoken questions. There was no immediate sign of who had done it, no weapon left behind, no clear struggle visible. Only a growing sense that Emily hadn't simply stumbled into danger, someone had brought her there. The once silent house now held a story that would haunt Maplewood forever. The autopsy results came back 2 days after Emily was found, confirming what investigators already suspected. She had died from blunt force trauma to the head, likely the result of a single, deliberate strike. There were no signs of sexual assault, no defensive wounds that suggested a struggle, and nothing to indicate that she had been restrained. It appeared quick, intentional, and chillingly controlled. The medical examiner estimated she had been dead for nearly 3 weeks, almost the exact amount of time she had been missing. That meant she had likely been killed the same night she disappeared. Detectives worked around the clock to piece together her final hours. They returned to the abandoned house, collecting everything that could hold a clue: discarded wrappers, pieces of fabric, even the cigarette butts left by the window. Forensics soon matched one of those cigarette filters to a partial DNA profile already in the criminal database. It belonged to a local man named Daniel Rowe, a 31-year-old with a record for trespassing and harassment. He lived less than a mile from the Harper family and had been questioned once before early in the investigation, though nothing had tied him to Emily at that time. When detectives searched his small rented apartment, what they found was enough to send chills through everyone involved. Hidden in a box beneath his bed were several personal items belonging to Emily: bracelets, a school photo, and a note she had once written to a friend. Each item was carefully kept, as if collected over time. There was also a prepaid phone, the same type used to send the mysterious text messages that had first caught investigators' attention. Phone records later confirmed it was the same number that had messaged Emily before her disappearance. Daniel claimed he barely knew her, insisting the items were planted, but evidence told a different story. Neighbors recalled seeing him walking near the park around the time Emily vanished, though no one had paid much attention then. Security footage from a nearby gas station also showed a car matching his dark sedan with a dented fender passing through the area that same evening. It was the same kind of car another resident had reported seeing parked near the road leading to the abandoned house. As police pieced it together, the story began to form a grim picture. Daniel had likely been following Emily for weeks, sending messages and watching her routine until he found the right moment. When she left home that evening, he must have intercepted her on the quiet stretch near the park. Whether he lured her or forced her into his car, no one could say for sure. But all signs pointed to him driving her straight to that old house, a place far enough from town where no one would hear a sound. The community, still raw from the discovery of Emily's body, reacted with anger and disbelief when Daniel was identified as the prime suspect. Many knew him only as a quiet, unremarkable man who kept to himself. No one had guessed he was capable of something so monstrous. The police officially arrested him on a rainy Tuesday morning, the same day Emily's classmates gathered at her high school for a memorial service. As news cameras captured the moment he was led away in handcuffs, a somber stillness fell over Maplewood. Behind closed doors, detectives reviewed the case files, knowing there were still missing pieces. No one fully understood why Daniel had chosen Emily or what had driven him to commit such an act. But one fact remained certain: she had trusted the wrong person, and he had used that trust to lead her to a place she would never leave. The trial began 6 months after Daniel Rowe's arrest, drawing crowds of reporters and locals who filled the courthouse each morning. Maplewood had never seen a case like it. Every headline, every whispered conversation revolved around Emily Harper's name. Her photo appeared beside news anchors' faces each night, a reminder of the quiet girl whose disappearance had shaken an entire town. The courtroom was heavy with silence when the prosecution presented its evidence: the phone records, the personal belongings found in Daniel's apartment, the DNA from the cigarette butt, and the security footage showing his car near the park. Each piece stacked against him like bricks, forming a wall of guilt. Daniel sat motionless throughout most of the proceedings, his face expressionless, his eyes fixed somewhere far away. His defense attorney argued that the evidence was circumstantial, that someone else could have planted those items, that the system wanted an easy conclusion. But the jury didn't seem convinced. The weight of the facts, combined with his eerie calmness, left little doubt in their minds. Witnesses took the stand, including Emily's mother, who spoke through tears about her daughter's kindness and how her laughter once filled their home. Even hardened officers in the courtroom looked down, avoiding her eyes as she described the unbearable emptiness left behind. When the verdict finally came, it took less than 4 hours of deliberation. Daniel Rowe was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole. The courtroom exhaled a collective breath, yet the victory felt hollow. No sentence, no punishment could bring Emily back. Outside the courthouse, her parents stood before cameras, their hands clasped tightly together, thanking the community for their support. The wind caught Emily's photo from a nearby poster, sending it fluttering down the steps like a silent goodbye. As months passed, Maplewood tried to return to normal, but the town carried a new kind of quiet. The old abandoned house where Emily was found was demolished not long after the trial. For a while, people gathered near the site, leaving flowers, candles, and letters. Eventually, a small memorial garden took its place, planted with white lilies and a single oak tree. On windy days, the leaves rustled like whispers of remembrance. Emily's story changed Maplewood in ways that could never be undone. Parents became more cautious, keeping closer watch over their children. Schools introduced new safety programs, teaching students to recognize warning signs and trust their instincts. The Harpers created a scholarship in Emily's name, offering support to students who showed kindness and compassion, the same qualities that had defined their daughter. Even years later, those who lived through it could still recall the atmosphere of those weeks: the missing posters, the candlelight vigils, the uneasy glances between neighbors. Some said the town lost its innocence that autumn, while others believed it found its strength. Though grief lingered, so did unity. The community that had once searched every corner for Emily now worked together to protect others, refusing to let her memory fade into another cold case headline. Every October, on the anniversary of her disappearance, people gathered at the memorial garden. They lit candles, shared stories, and released sky lanterns into the night. As the lights drifted upward, soft and glowing, they seemed to carry a message with them, a promise that Emily Harper would never be forgotten and that even in tragedy, her light would continue to guide those left behind.